All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Binghamton City Council work session for Monday, May 16th, 2022. We have a flag on our screen, so we will pledge allegiance to the flag on our YouTube screen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty for all.
Justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Janine. Mr. Clerk, will you do a roll call for us, please?
Yes. Okay, Councilman Scaringi,
Present.
Councilwoman Resnetti,
Present.
Councilwoman Riley,
Present.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Present.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
Councilman Scanlon,
Present.
and President Strawn.
Present.
That's all 7 here.
Okay, for anybody looking in, from your right to left, we have Councilwoman Riley, Councilwoman Friedman, our clerk, Lee Rogers, Phil Strawn, Councilman Burns, and our presenters are going to be over here on the your far left. We're going to mix things up just a little bit. The mayor is here with Captain Bidwell, and we are going to let them. We're going to let them to present. It's probably going to be a big chunk of our meeting. So I apologize for everybody else on the call, but if you can be patient, we're going to go ahead and let them go for RL 22-146, I believe. And so we can have plenty of time for discussion and questions for them.
And thank you to the CDAC as well. I know I'll be as succinct and brief as possible so we can get to their presentation as soon as possible. Ready? Okay. So this RL number, let me see here, RL 22-146. This is to amend the 2022 budget to allocate $1 million in public safety funds to reduce gun violence. This was announced a couple of weeks ago. Really, this is in response to, Binghamton's not different than other cities, seeing an increase in violent crime and increase in gun-related incidents. I provided some of the data to City Council, the year-over-year increase, some mapping as well. This funding will help support staffing, technology, and other evidence-based efforts to do gun violence and hotspot policing. Really managed through the Southern Tier Crime Analysis Center. Captain David Bidwell is in charge there. That is a local hub for the state program, Gun Involved Violence Elimination, or GIVE initiative, through the Division of Criminal Justice Services. So this $1 million will help fund community policing and street outreach programs, data-driven hotspot policing, help fund our CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design, which has received statewide recognition, and we do trainings for other agencies, gun buyback programs, partnerships with the AG's office, violence intervention, which are deterrence, which are important programs, and also expand neighborhood watch partnerships. This funding is coming out of ARPA. It's really critical that we make investments in public safety. There's been a number of high-profile violent crimes in the city that certainly give neighbors pause, and more resources are needed to not just take illegal firearms off our streets, but make sure that we're engaging in the proactive community policing that all levels of government, as it relates to law enforcement, are involved in. I wanted to share with City Council. I would have included this in the packet if it was done, if it was said prior, but on Friday, I believe, President Biden was flanked by chiefs of police from across the country and spoke specifically about municipalities using ARPA funds for law enforcement. His quote was, "To every governor, every mayor, every county official, the need is clear. My message is clear. Spend this money now. Use these funds we made available to you. Prioritize public safety. Do it quickly before the summer when crime rates typically surge." Although I didn't know the president was going to say that, I certainly agree with it. And they have highlighted the ways that municipalities like Binghamton are using its ARPA allocation to deter violent crime and engage in community policing. Based on that call to action by the president, as well as looking at the timeline for our council meetings, I would request at this time that this resolution be expedited to allow, again, the funding to become available as soon as possible. We're going to be at Memorial Day before the next meeting. With that, Captain Bidwell is here. If you have any specific questions on the Crime Analysis Center, but the release from a couple of weeks ago, I think, does a pretty comprehensive job of talking about what the effort is here and in the plans.
Okay, Councilwoman Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strawn. Thank you for being here. I have to just preface this by saying that I'm unable to connect to the Wi-Fi, so I'm unable to reference some like documents or quotes that I was hoping to be able to. So I'm going to be transparent in saying I was troubled by this request, and I do have some questions. First of all, can you explain how data-driven hotspot policing differs from neighborhood profiling?
I'm not familiar with the term neighborhood profiling.
Well, I mean, just profiling like certain residents or groups of people that with the sort of attitude that they are inherently more likely to commit a crime based on where they live.
I'll let Captain Bidwell discuss hotspots policing and the efforts behind it. These areas that I identified were not generated by me. They came from the Division of Criminal Justice Services and our existing programs that they fund and participate in. So this is to support existing state programs under the governor and the Division of Criminal Justice Services. But Captain Bidwell can speak for a moment about data-driven and hotspots policing.
Sure, hotspot policing is it's just what it's, so you have a map, and then depending on the crime, so we break down our crimes in part one crimes. So it could be burglaries, larcenies, rapes, robberies. And so the crime is as your map is laid out in front of you, if there's a certain amount of crimes that occur in a location, and on our hotspot maps, they turn yellow. And so that just means it's just an indication that there's been a lot of crime in that area. And so for hotspot policing, that is where we would focus patrols on.
So in aside from this example, Captain, would it be the case that if we have many complaints of car larcenies on the west side, we may assign a car there on overtime to be a presence in that area and hopefully deter that activity?
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that we do. So SUNY aggravated assaults. We're an aggravated assaults jurisdiction. So we have a tremendous amount of aggravated assaults. So in the months of May and June, if we see a fluctuation where our aggravated assaults are occurring more frequently, say on the Main Street corridor, then we would allocate resources to there.
And is there data to show that that is an effective way to lower crime rates or deter people from committing crimes in those areas?
I mean, I personally don't do the studies. I'm sure there are studies out there, and I'd be more than happy to find for you. But all our data goes to New York State. So I would, and I'm just making assumptions that they wouldn't continue to fund us if it wasn't working.
Okay. Would that be data that could be acquired from the Crime Analysis Center?
We sent data out, yes, to all the police administration.
Okay. Because do you see my concern here that there are areas that would be labeled hotspot areas, and therefore the people who are around those areas are immediately labeled as like more likely to do a crime or more suspicious? Does that make sense?
I know what you're saying, but for us, it's just purely a numbers game. So if this is where the crime is occurring, this is where people need more police. So this is why we would focus more police efforts that way.
Okay. And I know, so again, I wish I could reference the email that was sent out. I apologize that I don't have that. But I noticed that a lot of the specific initiatives that this $1 million is proposed to go to, a lot of this was addressed in the police reinvention collaborative plan, right? Like crime reduction through environmental design, which is to be honest, the one aspect of this that I do actually agree with, and I could see how that would lower crime rates. So since a lot of these bullet points have already been addressed, I'm wondering if there's data to show that our commitment to these or investment in these has led to a reduction in crime before we throw an additional $1 million at these same 5 or 6 bullet points.
The police collaborative plan was just a plan. It's safe to say that not everything in that plan has been completed in terms of a project, or may represent ongoing or annual needs of the department that are effective tools. So SEPTED or gun buyback programs or community policing, that's something we want to do on an annual basis. But I think what the statistics would show is that in all of the areas that we were talking about, the crime rates are increased. The violent crime has increased. The gun crimes have increased. And this is a part in response to that and trying to prevent future crimes. These initiatives, which again are supported by the state of New York through its crime analysis centers as evidence-based violent crime deterrence.
Okay. Again, this concerns me as when we were receiving feedback on the police reinvention collaborative's plan, every single piece of feedback we received was negative. And additionally, so far, the vast majority of feedback we've heard, or at least I've heard at these meetings and from my constituents personally, about how the ARPA funding should be spent is on housing. And the reason why I feel so strongly about that is because besides environmental design, all of these are reactionary, right? Except if we can increase or improve the material circumstances that people live, that's something that reduces crime. In light of the shooting that happened in Buffalo, that was done by a self-proclaimed white supremacist, like I struggle to see how any of these initiatives, like foot patrols, would have stopped something like that from happening. Or the shooting that we had on the east side. You know what I mean? It's like, there's no, at least that I've seen, there's no data to show that any of these initiatives would have prevented those things from happening. And I know it's, it's speculation. It's impossible to say like, this could have gone differently. This would have gone this way. But $1 million is a huge chunk of this money, and to spend it in such an unpopular way, it's I don't know. I'm like kind of at a loss for words until I can see the data that shows that any of these lead to a reduction in crime. I can't support something like this. I can't. Thank you.
Councilman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President Strong. Can you guys hear me? Hello there. Thank you for being here. And thank you for alerting us that you would come as well. I do have some questions similar to what Councilwoman Friedman just alluded to. First, though, in our packet, we did not receive as extensive of an description as you did in the news report, the press release, as you mentioned earlier. I think since this is legislation that we need to be prepared for, it is incumbent upon us to always have the most detail in our packet so that we can be readily prepared. Now, I do thank you for the data that you sent in a separate email, but I have a question. So we received a document that says 2021 and 2022 year-to-date gun violence. Do you have that packet?
I don't have that in front of me. But.
Okay, I'll read it. So I'm going to take this down for clarity. In the data, there are 2 columns. It states 1/1/2021 to present And column 2 said 1/1/22 to present. So if you were analyzing these charts, you would think that the second column is a combination of the first and the second. So what does this data really tell us? Was that a typo in the first column? So it says 1/1/21 to present, which would be 5/16/22. The second column says 1/1/22 to present. So that would mean it includes data from the first column. Is that correct?
My understanding of that chart is that it would be as of last week, year to date 2021 and year to date 2022. So basically looking at, say, the first 4.5 months of 2021 and the first 4.5 months of 2022.
So column 2 would have data from the first.
Nope, it would be.
So it's 1/1/21 to 1/1/22.
Yeah,
And then a new set of data collected.
that's
from one-
correct.
Okay. 'Cause that's
It's attempting to understand the year to date, basically.
per year data, and then 2 current year data, 2 separate sets of data. Okay, thank you. Okay.
No, it would have been basically from January 1st to, and it depends on, I don't have it right in front of me, but we're basically looking to from January 1st of this year to, let's say, last week. How does that
In both
compare to
columns?
January 1st of last year to this week? Yeah. Basically.
But that would be a broader, right? So that would be a broader gap. If we're looking at 1/1/21 to 2022.
No. What 1/1/2021 to May 16th,
of
2021
Okay.
versus January 1st of this year to May 16th of this year. And again, as I stated in there, some of the data was pulled, when we were looking to analyze some crimes a couple weeks ago. But
Okay.
it's basically looking at a year to date for this year compared to a year to date for last year.
For the same period of time.
Yes, roughly.
Okay, but it's not cumulative. So for the entire year in 2021, you're not saying we only had 11 shots
That's
fired.
correct.
Okay.
And I would say that as it relates to data, the sample size on this is probably too small to make
and
complete.
that- You know where I was going.
To
in terms
make
of
complete-
analyzing data,
Yeah,
right?
to make,
And making a substantive statement and highlighting it in red based upon, again, the response rate, our sample size, how it was collected. You can infer some information, but again, I don't think we have the data points to necessarily conclude that what we have in front of us is enough to then act.
So what I would say on that is that if relying on the data, this data alone, no. But however, I agree with President Biden, exactly what he said. I agree with chiefs of police and law enforcement leaders from across this country who have said that in the last year, there's been an increase in violent crime. There's a qualitative nature of the ghost guns issue that we're seeing. So I would say that I rely on expertise in this area, which includes Captain Bidwell, the chief of police, and their recommendations for how things should be prioritized.
That's great. However, when we're looking for local data and you provide it, we assume that we are to infer our responses in relation to the data we were given. Does that make sense?
Partly, but I think that, yes, that does make sense.
Okay, so now, can you clarify for us on the second report? It says gun arrest 2021, CPW second, CPW third. What is CPW?
Criminal possession of a weapon.
Oh, thank you. There was no legend. So I was like, oh gosh. Okay, thank you for that. And then this data, again, is only for that same specified time frame, right? It's not cum data over the course of an entire year.
Assuming that I'll have to look at,
You sent this, right?
I did, I just, yes. So I was looking at the first, again, this was done in relation to this release and the information that was included in the release. There had been, at that time, 18 confirmed reports of shots fired in the city this year. In 2021, over that same time period, there had been 10 confirmed shots fired.
Okay. And we do also have to take into account, we were still under the COVID, some of the barriers. And if we look at this data again, comparatively, we were more free and there were more activities. People were coming out of a lockdown just for landscape and time of this chunk of data. Would you agree?
I think that crime is a leading cause of statistics, and you can look at statistics in a lot of different ways. We were trying to give City Council a bit of an overview of what's happened, maybe some specific incidents, so you can see a little bit of the picture that the police see on a daily basis and some of the data that they look at. There are a number of underlying issues. We know that since COVID began, there's been an increase in violent crime. There's been an increase in gun crime. I'm sure criminologists over the next decades will spend time trying to answer those questions.
Absolutely.
But
why this period of time? Why was that? Why were these periods selected in terms of comparator data?
I wanted to get a year-to-date look compared to the year before. I've also been mayor since January 1st, so I wanted to compare how did my first 5 months go compared to first 5 months so a year ago.
Okay, thank you. And then the last report we received, you mentioned ghost gun. Just for our clarification, so we understand what we received. Can you tell me, and maybe this is Bidwell's question, what is a ghost gun?
Sure, absolutely. So a ghost gun is a gun that's not serialized, so there's no way to know where the gun came from. A quick version is, so there's a company called Polymer 80. What a Polymer 80 is, it is a gun that is 80% complete. So your lower receiver is plastic. It's going to come like a big, it's going to come in the shape of a gun, but there's going to be where pins would slide in and out of the gun, they're not drilled out. Where the barrel would expand past the end of the frame, that part's not drilled out. So when you get this kit in the mail, you have to drill some holes, you have to knock some stuff out to make it 100% complete. So the way they get around it is because the gun is 80%, only 80%, they're allowed, they can ship it in the mail, it's completely legal, and then whoever buys it has to finish it. And then technically you're supposed to contact the ATF, you're supposed to get a serial number made for it, but that's not what happens. So then you have no way of ever knowing that gun even exists.
Okay. So the ones, when we see ghost guns, those are the ones that are not assembled?
No, so I mean, and Polymer 80 is only one company. There's other versions that are just the same part where it's a kit that you get and then you order a trigger assembly and then you put the gun together at home.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Now, clarify for me, because again, I did talk to Chief Custody. Typically, we fund lines for additional officers to align with the training academy, correct? So that we can have our hires on board so that they can attend the training academy. Is that correct?
We start paying our new recruits the minute that they are hired and while they go through the Broome County Law Enforcement Academy. That's correct.
No, that wasn't my question. So typically we hire so that we have our candidates in time to begin the training academy, right? So our process typically with hiring and HR and things, it takes a little while, right? And let me go back. How often is the police academy?
Once a year.
And when is it this year?
It's ongoing right now.
Okay, so if we were to hire candidates now, based upon a budgetary change, they would not enter the academy, right? So if we're adding money to a budget line item now, it is likely that these candidates would not enter training until the next session, which would be in 2023, correct?
Or the possibility of having another academy. But the other thing that we have to deal with is we can't just hire people that has to go through the civil service process.
Absolutely.
So there's not a current civil service list that'll be given sometime in the next 6 months or so.
Right.
And,
but our rate limiting step typically is the academy.
Say that again?
Our rate limiting step, how we decide the calendar, is typically based upon the enrollment into the academy. Pretty much.
I'm not
Well, in
how
terms
we
of timing, that's our primary goal. We want to hire them and get them into the academy.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So then if we were to approve this budget, and again, I'm going to go through because I have a lot of questions, like I said in my email earlier. Because bullet number 1 talks about community policing and street outreach. Captain Zukoski alluded to the fact that we are not at our current goal in terms of officers on the street. So if we're going to do this, does that mean increased police? You mentioned overtime, because we can't put a new set of hires into the training school. So we would have to lean on overtime. But if we were to increase our force, is that one of the strategies to achieve bullet number 1, the community policing and outreach expansion?
Sure. So there are two kind of things going on in terms of police operations, and I'll lean on Captain Bidwell as well on this, but there's the patrol division that responds to calls for service. And then there are specialized units that engage in community policing, most notably our CRT unit, also foot and bike patrol units that do not respond to new calls, but engage in proactive community policing in neighborhoods, walking the beat, attending neighborhood watch meetings,
But
that sort of
still
thing.
expanding what we have in existence. That's what this says.
Exactly. So
Okay, that was my question. I know
yes.
what those are.
So-
I was asking about how we are trying to achieve the goal.
So it would be increased overtime availability for those community policing and street outreach efforts in part. It would be more overtime for potential workups through SEPTED, as I said.
Right.
Uh,
I'm hold on for me, because I'm
Okay.
still at bullet number 1. And I know SEPTED is down at bullet number 3, which is great. It's evidence-based. We have some strategies that we've heard. I would like more reports from SEPTED. That would be awesome. But I'm still here at number 1. So to achieve this goal, it would be to increase the number of police officers on the force and increase overtime availability through this fund.
That's correct.
Okay. And then we were told when we were going through the budget to add an officer, it was about $100,000 per officer. Is that still correct?
I don't know if Chuck Shager's on the call, but I'm not sure an exact number. For police, you have the salary and then probably double that for fringe benefits. So
Yeah.
roughly, we can use that as an example tonight.
Okay. So if we are to increase the force, and we're estimating what, maybe about 5?
So I would look to achieve the staffing as it relates to new hiring of police through the budget process
Okay.
or through a different allocation than
Than
this.
this. So we will not worry about the 100,000 times X, and then the ability to sustain those additional officers.
That's
through
correct.
This allocation.
That's
This allocation will then solely be part of the overtime payment process.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Now, MHAS was part of the reinvestment strategy. It was also highlighted as one of the things that we've launched in terms of responding to non-violent acts. And it's somewhat alluded to in bullet number 1. Am I correct?
This would not include, this funding would not include allocations to MHAS.
Okay, so let me clarify. So we did actually start the MHAS Crisis Service Alternative Response Program.
So as it relates to MHAS, and it's good that CDAC is on the presentation tonight, the funding that was allocated towards MHAS to grow their programs has not yet been used by MHAS. I'm not a spokesperson for them. They've had some significant staff and leadership turnover. So they have been asked to find ways to basically newly spend that money. But they have an existing MHAS folks who go on calls for service. So that is still in place. We were talking about is the expansion for that.
Okay.
They have not yet expanded, and it's been on MHAS side. The money has been available from the
Okay.
city
But
side.
they are providing that service.
That's correct.
And it has, again, anecdotally, with no data, again, I've heard that it has been beneficial. So that is not included in bullet number 1?
No.
Okay. We already asked, so thank you for that. We talked about the data-driven hotspots. We talked about crime prevention. of CPTED. Now, the CPTED data, again, has been feedback received through constituents and various officers. But can we have more formalized reporting like we do of our calls for the district when there's something that has been deemed highly successful? So for example, there's some data that came through CPTED that then decreased the number of calls in this area or something. Can we have that? Is that possible?
I'm trying to think in terms of what reporting. I mean, there are reports that are derived. CPTED, we call it a workup. So a CPTED workup does a couple officers visit, they take photos, they make recommendations to the business or to the area. So that is really the work product that's out of there. In terms of reporting, again, this is a state program. In terms of its efficacy, would be through DCJS.
Right. But if they made a report to, for example, a business in the 3rd district, and then the business agreed, and we saw a significant reduction. So say one of the trigger or the hot spots that were noted in the state funding, because remember, we did have a workforce initiative and a crime reduction initiative that was launched last year, and they increased jobs. I think it was through Broome County, City of Binghamton and Broome County. We were at that meeting together, Jared. Do you remember?
I remember the meeting. I'm not sure whatever ended up coming
And I
with
was
that.
going to ask you about that because again, that was a lot of money that was for the same effort. And we don't have any data, nor do we know anything about the allocation.
That wasn't a city initiative. That was run through Broome Tioga Workforce.
Okay.
So we did not, it was not run by the city, nor did any city staff put that together.
Okay. Okay. But again, I don't want to ask that. But in terms of CPTED, so if there is a report regarding the 3rd district, would we be able to have access or be informed about such report or request?
I believe that in the past that, especially when a request for information was initiated by a council member, that they were included in the CPTED workup that was eventually presented to the property owner. So I don't think there'd be any issue with that.
Only if I initiate it though.
I don't think there'd be any issue for any member of council seeing those specifically in their district. I can just speak to when they've been shared with city council members in the past.
Okay, thank you. Then we talked about the violence initiatives, again, the violence interventions, and I will be reaching out to the Broome County because we were excited about, remember, we even took pictures at that event because we were excited about the money that was coming for our youth. And like you said, it wasn't ours, but they did report that it was a partnership between Binghamton and Broome and the New York State because they highlighted District 3 and District 4 as places they wanted to make sure that change was seen. So that's important to us. And if it was successful, that's something we can implement as well. That's the reason I bring it up. Finally, expanded neighborhood watch partnership. What does that mean?
I think it's something that we need to explore. When we have community safety events like National Night Out, that is an event that has survived through many years through volunteer donations, et cetera. We have a number of neighborhood watch or neighborhood assembly groups that may need some support in terms of organizing. If there is an effort to have an event, to host neighbors, to talk about maybe pedestrian safety issues, which I know is important to the First Ward folks, or if it's on the north side, we have collaboration between DPD as well as code enforcement to host a class in terms of, what to do if there's a house in your neighborhood you believe has suspected drug activity or other code issues. I think a lot of times these are being managed by people in their off hours, volunteer hours. So if they need some funding to help support them in terms of organizing, we're talking about a small amount, in the maybe a few $1,000s here or there, again, to help expand or maybe bring some official nature to those watch programs.
So it's not helping launch new watch programs per se.
Yeah, it could be. It could be if there is, on the south side is a pretty big area. So say somewhere in Councilman Strawn's district on the southwest side, they wanted a few block radius, wanted to get together and have maybe quarterly meetings with BPD. We have a funding capability to do outreach, maybe neighborhood flyers, that type of thing. If any one of those members wanted to attend maybe a training that was put on or help again organize, I think that would be useful. But represents a smaller dollar amount, I think, than the other programs.
Okay, and it's not really like forming watch programs like what happened in Florida with Trayvon Martin. It's more like a community organization, a group of residents that want more information. We are not creating people that are going to act as arms of the police
No.
department,
That's also not how the Neighborhood Watch program works, where they are in place right now.
how they should work, right?
Yeah, not in the city of Binghamton. I've attended dozens of Neighborhood Watch meetings over the course of 8 years, and they're all very positive, very community focused. The police are the enforcement arm in the city of Binghamton, of course.
That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. Is it okay if I give, and then I'll come right to you?
Sure.
Councilman Scanlon, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strawn. I just want to say I fully support the mayor's request for the $1 million investment to help the police. Based on the questions of Councilman or Councilwoman Riley and Councilwoman Friedman, they've never supported the police department, nor would they support them in the future. So I just want to say if Mayor Cram decided we need $2 million, $3 million of ARPA funds to support the police, I'd be all for it. Thank you.
Councilman Burns, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Captain, for coming down. The last few months for somebody that I've been very concerned about what's been going on. We had that 12-year-old girl that was murdered on the east side. Last year, we had the 16-year-old boy, I don't know, he shot 2 people, or he's accused of shooting 2 people over in Columbus Park. We had a shooting 3 blocks on the street, 3 blocks from my house, and very close to Councilman Strand's house. So, I'm all for doing whatever we can to get guns off the street and make our streets as safe as we possibly can. So, that said, I just have some questions. I'm going to go to your press release. So I understand that when we say additional resources for the Binghamton Police Department to fund more neighborhood foot and bicycle patrols, you're saying that we are not hiring new officers. So this $1 million, it's a lot of money, $1 million, is not going to go to hire new officers. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that, given the kind of scope and even the amount of funding that, and I can tell you that as of right now, there are no active people on a civil service list that I could hire. So we've expended the civil service list, and unless through a transfer from another agency, I could not hire any additional officers at this moment.
So this money, is that possible to hire somebody from another?
It is possible. It's very rare. And you see this in police agencies throughout the country. It doesn't matter if it's New York or Binghamton or Syracuse. It's very rare for an officer from a suburban police department to then transfer into an urban corps. The job is very different. The job is more challenging. Most times you see our officers that are transferring to state police, town of Vessel, that type of thing.
Captain, you talked about it has nothing really to do with it, except you brought it up, the aggravated assaults.
Yep.
With SUNY, did you say that there's a lot of
It's
them?
not just SUNY, it's just, we're an aggravated assault. So when we talk about give funds, our gun violence doesn't reach the numbers that a Rochester or Albany per se. So because we have the center, they fund part of the center, but then also the give funds go towards try and do lesser our aggravated assaults, because our aggravated assaults in the city itself, not just the Sunni population, is high.
Right. Is that mostly on what side of town is that? Correct.
So our two give jurisdictions are going to be downtown, and then, so it's going to be downtown from 4th Street to the river, from essentially the river all the way to the train tracks. And then on the west side, the majority of it will be 209.
Okay, so the $1 million. So how much money is it going to cost to, to get more foot patrols? I mean, we already have foot patrols. So are we going to, the $1 million, where's most of the $1 million going to be spent?
Sure. So I would say that, I can't give an exact breakdown. A lot of this has to do with discussions with DCJS in terms of how allocations are made. There was some new funding from the state, which was allocated, I think, about $15 million that will be distributed to the different agencies. So we have to look at where can we leverage funds. Certainly, I think a huge chunk of this will go in towards technology that supports law enforcement within the Crime Analysis Center, as those constantly need to be upgraded. But we were just talking on the way down the elevator, we have a huge interest right now in bike patrols. The chief said this morning, 25 officers has expressed an interest in doing some overtime on bikes. That's a great problem to have. We may need to buy some bicycles. We need to send them to some training that we can do in-house. So it would cover the overtime for that, any equipment that they need, maybe the bike that they can need. But, my vision of this is, on a Saturday afternoon in the city, whether it's any council district, folks mowing the lawn, playing outside with their kids could see a bike patrol from a BPD officer go by. That will be done through these funds and aligned with DCGS.
Okay, the crime-driven hotspots, the analysis center. I have a question about the analysis center, which, based on what happened up in Buffalo, is there any way that the analysis center can get information about who is buying guns in the city of Binghamton or Broome County? Like this kid bought that gun up in Endicott, so we know that he bought the gun in Endicott. How did we know that now? I guess the serial number on the gun, but would there any way of finding out who, if there's any young people buying guns, or where they, Dick's Sporting Goods would be able to tell me how many Ping drivers are being sold in Broome County. I'm just wondering if we know how many guns are being sold in the city or in the county.
So I can't speak on whether a legally purchased firearm. I don't have the answer to that. I can tell you that if somebody was turned away for a firearm purchase, we do have that information. So if somebody was turned down for a domestic violence history, a mental health history, or whatever qualifying factors would limit them from purchasing a firearm, if they attempted it, we would know that they attempted it, where they attempted it, and so we would know that.
Is it possible to find out how many guns, not the person who's buying them, but just how many guns are being bought in our world?
I can, that's not an answer I have, but that is an answer I can get you one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. The environmental design, again, I like that very much as well. The gun buyback programs. I have nothing against that, or I like the fact we can get any guns that we can get off the street. I'm for that. The neighborhood watch. Is it possible not to call it a neighborhood watch? Because it does. The neighborhood watch name does bring up images of Trayvon Martin about what happened to him in Florida. And it just seems, or that kid that went across state lines back in he was found not guilty during the Black Lives Matter. And the guy yesterday, or Saturday. I mean, these are the types of people that are drawn to neighborhood watches. You know what I mean? I'm a member of the Southside Neighborhood Assembly, who you helped us out Saturday, which was great. We had a nice concert over there, but we're not really a neighborhood watch. We're not looking to make the streets safer. If the police come over, we have a lot of questions about making them safer, but we're not, it's not Joe's turn to watch Vestal Avenue, as you said. But the image of that, if we keep talking about neighborhood watch, that's the image that comes into my mind. So if we could change that name, I would appreciate that. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilwoman Resonetti, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me okay? Thank you. Actually, a lot of my questions have been answered during this very robust discussion. I appreciate all the questions, and you, Mayor, and Officer Bidwell for being there to answer. Earlier, just a quick little question regarding ghost guns. I couldn't hear very well. Can you just, Officer Bidwell, explain to me? I missed this. Is it legal to get one of those kits in the mail, but illegal to actually assemble it and use it? Is that what I heard?
So it's legal to purchase, but then there are certain steps that you're supposed to follow. Once you purchase and complete the build, you're supposed to register it with the ATF afterwards.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. I think ghost guns are, that's just kind of a new thing, and I have some questions for folks and just want to be able to answer that correctly. Thank you. And again, thank you all for all those very good questions. I do want to thank the mayor for launching this bold proposal in the last few months. We have seen all these gun battles through even the West Side, illegal, and it feels like it's happening more and more, and it's scary. Illegal ghost guns, of course, have been used across the city, broad daylight murders. We even saw, we experienced that tragedy of losing that little girl to gun violence over at Councilman Scanlon's district. And so we do need some bold action. We need real leadership. And I just wanted to say that I do applaud the efforts from our mayor and police department. And I want to come out firmly to say that I am absolutely in favor of this legislation, and I will be sponsoring this and to be voted on as soon as possible. So thank you for all of that information you shared with us tonight.
Anybody, I'm going to say a couple things real quick. Councilman Scringy, anybody else have any other, what was that? Oh yeah, Councilman Scringy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Evening, Mayor. Evening, Captain. How are you?
Good.
Good. Captain, this might be directly for you. Are there any other systems that the BPD currently uses which dictates what geographic areas related to crime should be focused on, besides what you've already discussed?
So other than hotspot policing, or other than, so as far as when we talk about crime analysis, all we do is we're the numbers people. So what we do is I'll present to the chief, and we give them data weekly. And so all we're giving him is where the crime is occurring. But I mean, there's other things. So we have like our chronic offenders who we know who our gang guys are, who our gun guys are, who our violent offenders are, who our drug offenders are. So this is data we provide. And then from there, the chief puts his plan into action as where he wants to allocate the resources.
So 100% of the numbers that are being used to create these hotspot maps, which we also don't create, but the DCJ or the Division of Criminal Justice does, are solely based on geographic areas with high temperaments of crime rate, or offenders that we already know are either A, individuals who have been prosecuted with a crime, or B, repeat offenders.
So the hotspot mapping is strictly from reports that are generated. So
Right.
when reports are going to be scanned in, sent in through the computer, Joe Gaynor is our GIS guy. So when he runs his query, all he's doing is so if we're breaking numbers down from post to car post for our monthly give meetings, all that's coming out to Joe's not looking at anything. He's just running the query. So he'll run a query for a specific crime. So it could
Right.
be 22003, a drug crime. So that's it. All he's doing is just querying the numbers.
Right. So the point I'm trying to make is the data is not surrounded by demographics, by some broad geographic area to begin with, a particular neighborhood or geographic area over another. It's completely driven by crime related data that we already have on the books.
Submitted reports, yes.
Correct. Okay. I think there's an interesting linkage that hasn't been brought up yet that I'd like to address. And Mayor or Captain, for either one of you, I'll offer this question too. So it would seem to me, that the increased resources here with respect to the analytical center and the broad policy direction overall seem to have a strong correlation with what I would seem to think is probably going to be a pretty increased inventory list for the lockdown law on the residential side. And when we talk about hotspots related to crime, and just so everybody can kind of get an understanding here, right? So this is a current press release from the Department of Criminal Justice. So over the past 2 decades, research has stated that police can effectively address crime and disorder by focusing on hotspots, which is defined as small units of geography with high rates of crime. Again, notice nothing more than crime-related data. Known as hotspot policing or place-based policing, this strategy stands in contrast to traditional policy and crime prevention activities. If anybody would like anything evidence-based, there's Copper 95, National Research Council 2004, Braga et al. 2012. And the summation here is that quote, the data overwhelmingly suggests these results show that when police focus on hotspots, they can have a significant impact on crime in these areas. Further, there was little evidence to suggest spatial displacement of crime as a result of hotspot intervention. In other words, crime did not shift from one hotspot to other nearby geographic areas. So it seems like New York State is saying this is working and they've got the data and the research to back that up. But bringing it back more locally, I was wondering, Mayor or Captain, if you could speak to the positivity that this would have as the residential side of the lockdown law blossoms and comes into effect.
So that's maybe a difficult question. I think the lockdown is it's property based. So
Right.
Is it possible that the lockdown law could be used in conjunction with other hotspots policing, community policing? Of course.
Sure.
If there is a specific commercial property that's hosting an after hours club and aggravated assaults, shootings spill out from that location, which we've seen time and again, addressing that location, as you noted, will probably stop the crime. And it's not likely that it's just going to move to another location. So that's kind of a part of this. Obviously, there's no funding that's associated with the lockdown law as part of this $1 million, but nonetheless, it's another tool in the city's tool belt. I think, maybe lastly here, I didn't invent these programs, right? These were programs that are existing through the DCJS, recommended crime prevention. And a common theme of all of them is time. The time that an individual police officer is allotted to spend to help solve working side by side with residents. When you have a patrol officer that's responding from call to call to call, there's an accident on Riverside Drive, there's a burglary in progress on Main Street. There is really no time left in the shift to stop, slow things down, spend time with residents, spend time with neighbors, and even spend time with individuals maybe engaged in criminal activity to have strengthen really relationships in the community. So that's the overarching theme and what these resources will allow our officers to do.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Just a couple things. I know we're long on time, but this is obviously critically important. I just wanted to say that, I don't think we can possibly imagine, as our group, the pressure that the mayor and the chief and the captain are under with the circumstances that are going on. People want safe streets. Constituents were mentioned before. My constituents want safe streets. The whole city does. I think in all the above approach, whether it's code or whether it's energy policy or whether it's policing that we're talking about is appropriate. I think that housing, the environmental design, all those things are critical. But there is no scenario that any of those things would even have the possibility of making an impact relatively quickly. I think people are demanding something, but even with that being said, I don't think you'll just throw $1 million at something, even though people are, but the question that I have is really simple, and you wouldn't be here if it wasn't, but it's not a trivial softball question. These resources allocated in this way, we really feel that there's a good chance that it could make an positive impact in a tangible way relatively quickly to augment these resources to the police department and what we're trying to do. I know maybe it's like, duh, why would we be here otherwise? But it's a sincere question, because I think people are demanding that us as a council and the administration and the police do something. And but we want to make sure that it's being wise and being thought through and being spent in that way.
The answer from my perspective is yes. Captain Bidwell has served in patrol, special detail, SIU, now crime analysis. He can speak to the impact this will have.
Yeah, so I look at it from an aspect of like these community-based programs that we always talk about doing, but we don't ever have, either it's a financial reason or it's a personnel reason. I look at, for me, like if I talk about crime prevention, it's myself and Lieutenant Gazdick now. So when people want FaceTime, whether it's going to be a community issue, whether it's whatever, it's just, so it's either me or him. And a lot of time it's an overtime issue because I have my duties that I have to do during the day. So when Mary Ann Callahan is having an issue, or when it just comes down to people want FaceTime, they want to know what we're doing. And so and then like we can go through the list. We talk about community, so like the civilian police academy. It's another thing that we've talked about for years, but you have to have the funding to do it, which we haven't had. CEPTED, our CEPTED program, as robust as it is, and this probably leads New York State and in the state for the program, we do it on a shoestring budget. The state gives me, I think I had $5,500 this year to work on it. So we're talking about assessments, whether it's a problem location or whether a business needs an assessment done. So like the school district assessment. So to go to the school district, it's a multiple visits. So I'm either coming in early before my shift starts at 8 o'clock to go over there, or I'm going there at night because I have to do a nighttime assessment to see what the building looks like at night. So it's a huge time and money commitment that a lot of businesses want. Like we're doing one now for the Ross Park Zoo and the Discovery Center. So they want to upgrade their facilities on the exterior. They want to, they need new lights. They don't have any radio communication between the Discovery Center to the zoo. So I think when I sat through the police reform meetings, I think the number one thing I took away was there's two. Everybody felt that training was important, and everybody felt community policing was important. They wanted cops on foot. They wanted to see cops on bikes. But to do that, you either have to hire more people or you have to fund the overtime to do it.
Thank you. Well, I think, at least from my perspective, leadership from the President of the United States on down to our mayor and our local, our captain, our chief, and other people, we have to at least take them for what they're asking us to do, because, you know, our whole community is under a microscope as far as I'm concerned, to address these things as best we can. We want to do it in the right way, but certainly inaction would not be acceptable. Go ahead, Councilman Freeman. Quickly, we got to move
Thank
on
you.
here.
Yes, I have two quick questions that cropped up in our discussion. So as with any funding of a position, I wonder about the sustainability, and this is something that you know, I tend to ask about. So after this, let's say if we do use this $1 million to fund things like overtime and other you know, officers for specific purposes, what happens after that funding runs out? How are we going to fund this going forward?
Sure. So we have, I think it's until the end of 2025 to expend the dollars, as with all ARPA. And, you know, my hope would be is that we do not face the same type of rates of violent crime or gun crime in several years from now as we do today. We wouldn't give overtime or gun violence reduction overtime or hotspots policing if those hotspots are reduced. So this is not committing us to a 20-year career of a new law enforcement officer. This is a point in time investment, again, as President Biden said, to respond to a crisis that's happening right now in America.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So the foot and bike patrols, for example, that can only be funded through overtime. That can only be an officer who's being paid overtime.
Dave can speak more to operationally on that, but essentially, yes. I mean, we have in our downtown area bike patrols that are regular patrols, but in terms of hotspots policing or being able to really make it modular. So, hey, right now we're seeing some crime on Leroy Street. Let's have some foot and bike patrols in that side of town. It's Mary Street the next week, that type of thing. That is done through overtime. And as the grants that we get on an annual basis, the Edward Byrne grant, as well as the GIVE grants, work in the same capacity. It's through overtime.
Okay, so again, to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, we're saying that the only way that we can have these bike patrols, besides the ones that are already downtown, is by paying them time and a half?
Well, we have to look at our personnel capacity, right? That we cannot hire any other officers right now because of civil service, but you want to use overtime because you're putting existing officers that have experience out there to where the need is. And that's been the case for many, many years. That's how hotspot policing works. Now, I will say is that the community response team does hotspot policing. They are a regular unit, right? So they are 5 officers who are assigned to CRT, who do not respond to calls on a patrol, but instead surveil high crime areas, attend neighborhood watch meetings, do follow-ups as part of detectives. So that is a dedicated unit. If I had the ability to hire and add to that unit, that would be something that I would certainly consider, but I can't hire new, and I do not want to draw from an already depleted patrol division who is currently hiring overtime right now just to fill the minimums on shifts. That is an issue that we're looking to address through hiring, but it's a long process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming down. We appreciate it.
And I apologize to Mary Ann Callahan and the CDAC for stealing the #1 spot here. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Okay, Mary Ann and Steve, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm kind of glad I sat through that discussion, because what I'm going to tell you about right now has a lot to do with that discussion, and that is the work of the CDAC. I think you all know that we are appointed by you and by the mayor's office to oversee and make recommendations of the processing for the block grants for Binghamton. And you probably all know as well that there are new HUD requirements that require us to make much more specific recommendations than we had before. For example, in the past, we would be able to say we allocate X amount of dollars for roads in Binghamton. And we would say that based on an amount of money that was given to us by the person who works on roads in Binghamton. But this year we have to make very specific recommendations and give you a list of the roads that we are recommending. And I say that to tell you that the group that we have is probably one of the best groups I've ever worked with. You guys have appointed people who are committed to their communities. They care about what they're doing. And we have opened a dialogue in which people who have come around the table with very differing views often come to consensus. So that is one of the things I want you to understand as I talk to you about what we are doing here. It was unanimous consensus that we came to. We initiated new procedures that asked agencies from the community who do not ask us for money to give us input about their demographics, their clients, the things they thought the community needed, because we thought it would make a difference in what those recommendations would be. And we are also working on forms that the committee can use to get information from everyone that's consistent across the board so that we can do this in a very efficient manner, because as you can imagine, it's very complex. So you have in front of you the list of all of our recommendations. And I would point you to page 1, about 2/3 of the way down. You have unknown mental health provider, you have Binghamton Housing out of school program, and you have the City of Binghamton Community Policing going down to the bottom of that page. We, as a group, saw that the recommendation for MHOST, which came up in the mayor's discussion with you, was $50,000. Someone pointed out that that money had not been spent. And if that money had been allocated, $50,000 for MHOST, we could not find money for the after-school program for the Binghamton Housing Authority, and we could only give the community policing unit $3,000. During the course of our discussion, all of us around the table agreed that we would like to go back to the mayor who had made that recommendation about MHOST and talk to him about it. As the chair, I was the person who went to talk to the mayor. Not only did the mayor understand and agree with us, he even made sure that we had enough money to give to the after-school program and more to give to the community policing unit, because the people around the table who come from all of the neighborhoods in this community thought that community policing and keeping youth busy after school were very, very essential programs. So the decisions that we have made are based on the fact that we looked at our community, not through statistics, I'm sorry to say. We looked at them as it affects our neighborhoods. Here in the first ward, we have had a neighborhood watch, and a neighborhood watch does not necessarily, because one group used that name wrong, does not mean it's a bad thing. We've been able to do things that have made the people in this neighborhood feel a whole lot more comfortable. And that was the attitude that we had around the table. The other thing that happened this year that has never happened before is the COC usually makes recommendations on the homeless projects. And the CDAC has always sort of bent to their expertise, and we've accepted their programs. This year, we did not do that. Some people around the table felt very strongly, and they convinced the rest of us that we needed to look at those things and we needed to make our own recommendations. So in the on page 2, you will see recommendations from us, not the COC. That's pretty much in a nutshell what we did this year. And I think Steve probably has some things to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to stress that we don't yet know the amount of money that the city will be getting for any of the HUD grants yet. Normally we get that in good years in February, and bad years in April. So it's not a great indication if it's almost, halfway through May and we haven't gotten those numbers yet. So there is no point until we get those numbers for the mayor to do his budget. But once I have that, I will sit down with the mayor and deputy mayor and help them, review this recommendation and help him determine if he, what parts he wants to follow, and if he's got questions, and if he wants more clarification from various departments, we can definitely get into that. This is a change from previous years because we were hit last year with HUD reinterpreting the rules that we had been following for a decade or so before. So the mayor's budget then becomes the public review budget. So that way the public is able to review the final budget prior to city council approving it. Once that does occur, city council will have a public hearing, and hopefully we can get this all hammered out before the due date in mid-July. If there is, once we do have the numbers from HUD, they will probably give us an extension anyway, just due to the lateness. But yes, so these numbers here are meeting all of the minimums and all the maximums that CDAC has to work with. Once the mayor has his budget, it will be the same way. We'll make sure the minimums and maximums are kept. Just looking to see if there's anything quite different or unique. We do not yet know a home community housing development project yet. We're working on that. The last ones from previous years are just wrapping up. That would include Family Enrichment Network's Virgil Street property. That includes Greater Opportunities Munsell property, and that includes First Ward Action Council's 33 Linden homebuyer program or homebuyer project. So we do not yet know that, but that's okay for now. Similar unknowns, as Marianne pointed out, the unknown mental health response provider. We do not know if that'll be MHAST or some other agency, but CDAC obviously determined there was a need for some sort of mental health funding going forward. So does anyone have any questions about this budget or about our process at all?
Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President Strawn. I just want to say kudos to you, Marianne, and team, since you will take the word back, and Steve, because being a member of the committee, I've seen the changes in dates and due dates and all of the different inquiries that occurred, not only during the meetings, but through the numerous emails going back and forth. And I was just invigorated by the communications I received from all of your committee members. So I just want to say kudos to you guys, and thank you for giving us this comprehensive list. And we will be able to follow up. Well, I will follow up directly to if I have questions regarding some of the allocations. Again, I know we don't have the final number, but I think what you've given us is dramatically different from what we've seen in the past. So again, kudos to you guys. Thank you.
Madam Councilwoman, I'd also like to add that your appointee made some extremely valuable contributions. She was a little shy at first, but she has come to be one of the best, most on the button neighborhood people that we have around the table. So I thank you for her.
Councilman Burns, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, thank you, Steve and Marianne. Thank you for all your hard work. I got lucky. I want to thank Michelle O'Loughlin. She calls me regularly.
Yes.
And keeps me informed of what's going on. And it amazes me how hard she works. And I know that all of you work that hard, so it's really
Michelle
nice.
is special. Michelle is
Thank you.
special. She's on the ball. She really is. When we need numbers, when we need statistics, we go to Michelle. We all have our parts, and she plays hers remarkably well.
think so. Councilwoman Resnick and I did. I'm not sure if there was any other ones. Is there any vacancies right now? Did we fill those?
I believe there's one more vacancy, and I think it's the at-large position, which is a council-wide appointment. I believe that's the only one left.
So that could be anybody or from any part of the city.
Well, technically, we went through the rules. I don't think technically someone has to be a city resident, which is weird. But yeah, I mean, for how it's typically done, usually, yeah, it's going to be someone who lives in the city who's interested.
All right. So if anybody has anybody, bring their name forward, I guess.
And
Not the second, but don't be hesitant.
if I can add one more thing, we often had to postpone meetings because we did not have quorum, because we did not have the appointees we needed. So it is critical for you all to give us the people that we need so that we can do our work. And we thank you for that.
Yeah, and I'll just say, unfortunately, the last two appointees came in just right at the very end of the process. So unfortunately, they weren't able to engage in this budget vote, but they will be able to progress going forward, which will include the summer on-site monitoring visits, as well as spinning up again to start the whole process again in September.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Steve or Marianne? Councilman Scaringi, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to take 5 seconds here to sound a little corny and thank Marianne Callahan, who's been representing the ward on this over the last 6.5 years. I feel like the appointment that I got to offer was a simple one. So I'm sure you'll have things to catch me up on more specifically, whether it's first district or anything else. I'm sure you'll do that at some point tomorrow when you call me to follow up on something else as it relates to it. So I appreciate the great communication and the great relationship we've had over the last 6.5 years. And I know she'll continue to serve. I definitely echo the sentiments. This is definitely the most disaggregated and detailed budget that I've seen from the CDAC. Not that past ones haven't inherently been bad, but it's good to see positive evolution year over year over year. I'm fairly certain, and Marianne and Steve could probably correct me if I'm wrong, I might be, but I'm pretty sure this is the first year in a while where vacancy issues impacting an inability to hold a meeting due to quorum is at its lowest that it's been in a while. So I know that's something that I've heard from Marianne, and I appreciate my colleagues who stepped up and found someone in their respective seat. I think if anybody does have a name, Mr. President, I'll suggest that maybe we start forwarding CVs or resumes to you and the clerk's office, so those can be aggregated and distributed to the body. This seems like a vote, just like Steve had mentioned. If the budgetary process is ending up, maybe we can, if we get a good qualified person in there, who I personally think should be a city resident, we can get them in there and actually set them up for success to have a full body moving forward in the upcoming year. And lastly, I just wanted to, I know this was a dip over from discussion from before, but I know some people have brought this up with concerns with respect to Neighborhood Watch. So we do have a pretty robust Neighborhood Watch in the ward. I would suggest to everyone go to nnw.org, November whiskey. I think we often tend to forget that the Neighborhood Watch is actually not the name of the organization. It's actually the National Neighborhood Watch. They are a fully 501c3. They offer strategies and resources to establish local organizations and local clubs, if you will. So there's a very positive nuance with that name because it carries weight. Obviously, some people have negated that in a negative way over time, but I think it's just important. And if you don't have a neighborhood watch in your neighborhood or community or on your side of the town, and that's a good place to go to reference. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Yes, definitely forward any names or information to us, and we'll see if we can move that along. Any other questions or comments for Steve or Marianne? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good night.
Mr. Pearsall, go ahead. RL 22.
Good evening. The board has asked me to come before you to request an additional $400,000 in insurance recovery revenue for the CNBAF project. And we would like to use that to increase the appropriations for professional services related to the CNBAF in the amount of $350,000 and $50,000 remaining to go to the equipment lease line for CNBAF. This does not need to be expedited, but we would certainly like to see this occur as soon as possible. We've allotted some $2,777,000 earmarked for specific projects based on quotes. And the insurance company has been very helpful, and there is an additional $1 million in transit even as we speak. So this will take the total number we have earmarked for insurance recoveries to $3,440,000. Of that, $2 million has arrived, so the rest will be receivable as a revenue.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Charlie on RL 22-143?
Mr. President, can I make a comment, please?
Sure, go ahead, Councilman Scanlon.
Mr. Pearsall, I understand it's your last meeting. Is that correct?
That is true. I have given my notice of retirement at the 27th of this month will be my last day at the plant. And I want to thank you all for representing the city and this valley in the way you do. And I have appreciated working with you. And for the most part, I agree with all of you. And I hope that, whenever you have challenged me, I've presented our position well. And I know you have done the same. So thank you all very much.
Charlie, congratulations on your retirement. Enjoy yourself. I know you worked hard over the years, so thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations, Charlie.
Thank you very much.
I did not realize that. Thanks, Councilman Scanlon, for letting us know that. I did not realize that. Yep, good. Well,
Congratulations, Charlie. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Are there
Mr.
4 people
Pearsall.
coming
Thank
to
you
take
for
your place?
everything.
No, actually, you will be familiar with the name who has been earmarked and accepted the position. So I won't steal any thunder there, but I don't think you'll be greatly surprised. And I think it will be a good choice. And I think she will hit the ground running. And I hope you treat her as well as you have treated me.
okay. Well, thank you, Charlie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Dr. Burling, RL 22-142.
Hi, this ought to be fairly simple. Part of the Cities Rise program involves returning the sale of the property income back into the grant line. So I am requesting that we have a revenue line established for the Cities Rise program so we can do just that.
Okay, any questions or comments for Dr. Burling? RL 22-142. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Sean, you're still with us. Go ahead with RL 22-145.
Yes, good evening, council members. This is a RL that the planning department is hoping to establish for a determination of historical significance for demolition of unsafe accessory structures. And the motivation behind this RL is to expedite the review period for determinations of historical significance for unsafe accessory structures, and those particularly that are in such a state of disrepair and deterioration that they've almost collapsed upon themselves. And so we're really hoping to ease the burden and period of review time on private property owners within the city by doing this.
Okay, any Councilman Burns, go ahead.
Hi, Sean. What type of structures? What do you mean exactly?
So in most cases, this would mean structures such as garages. There is a definition of an accessory structure, which we've defined as any subordinate structure located on the lot, the use of which is clearly incidental to and associated with the principal structure. So in most cases, it would be things like barns, garages, carriage houses, things like that. But it could include things like sheds, or gazebos or greenhouses. In the city of Binghamton, any structure over 40 years of age is reviewed by our Commission on Architecture and Urban Design. And because that has about a month turnaround time, that can be quite a long period of time for private property owners to wait when some of these structures have already collapsed on themselves.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Go ahead. Mr. Seacrest is gonna
Sean, this
speak
is
in here.
Brian. Just to kind of give an example for the council members. I recently was asked to review a building on the west side. It's 2-story cinder block building behind a home. One wall is being held up by a tree that grows by the garage. The roof has started to collapse. But because it's over more than 40 years old, that would have to come to the board, the COD, to be reviewed for historic significance. Is that correct? Under the current code?
Correct, and that happens frequently.
And what you're asking is to make this more of an administrative procedure so it can be streamlined, that these buildings can be taken care of in a faster means.
Yes,
faster
under
track.
under this RL, there would be staff level review by the supervisor of building construction and code enforcement, as well as myself. And if we're both in agreement, then that these structures could qualify for staff level review.
Thank you, Sean.
Any other questions or comments for Sean on RL 22-145? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tito, you out there?
I'm here. Good evening,
Great.
everybody.
Go ahead and tell us about 22-148, please.
Yeah, so this is for a project to construct amenities on the riverfronts. This is a grant that we got a few years ago now. And we were ready to go out to bid last year, but one of the funding agencies needed some changes made to the plans. And so our engineer on the project, CPL, had already expended sort of all of their funds under the contract, and they need additional funding to make those changes to the drawings. It's not, they don't anticipate that it'd be the full $10,000, but it's we're asking for an amount not to exceed $10,000 to make sure we're safe. And the funds would be coming from the grant proceeds.
Okay, any questions or comments for Tito on RL 22-148? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck is going to, he'll have the next two sections, but he's going to present RL 22-138 and 139 for us. Go ahead, Chuck.
Phil, 138, is that the Parks Department?
Yes.
Okay, they have two RLs out there. Which one's the first one, the budget amendment or the fees?
The first one's amend the 2022 park budget, and the second one
Okay.
is the fee schedule for pool fees at Rec Park.
Okay, the budget amount for the parks, what they want to do is hire a higher level person at a $15 an hour labor rate than what was in the budget. They're going to keep the budget exactly the same. They're just changing the type of people that they're going to hire to help make the summer go better for them. They're not going to exceed what they have in the budget. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah. Any questions or comments on 22-138 for Chuck? Okay, go ahead, Chuck. The next one is the swimming pool fees at Rec Park.
We're basically removing all the pool fees across the city of Binghamton here. I think they had Rec Park still in there to charge them, but we have not charged fees the last 2 years and do not want to charge fees also this year.
Okay, that sounds good for our community. Any questions for Chuck on 22-139? Okay, thanks. We'll go right into your other section here. 22-141.
141 is a ordinance to increase our insurance recovery and increase and create a line for demolition in the insurance fund. This is for the fire that occurred on 159. I think the RL says 156. It's 159 Conklin Ave. That burned down probably 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago. As we discovered, they do not have insurance for the property, or at least that's what we're being told. So we're going to have to go after the owner ourselves. And in order to pay them, we're going to have to increase the insurance recovery and increase the demolition line.
Okay, any questions or comments on 22-141 for Chuck?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Councilman Scanlon, go ahead.
It's probably for Mr. Seacrest. So what can we do to collect the money from, this is Mr. Andrews' property, correct?
I didn't quite hear you, Tom.
This is Mr. Andrews' property, correct?
Yes.
I would not say this, Mr. Andrew, this is LLCs, but yes.
Okay. Brian, what can we do to collect this money from Mr. Andrews? You got to be something we can do, even though he has no insurance for fire insurance. Got to be something we do. Can we take possession of the property?
We would be able to sue, or the cost can be rolled into its taxes, the property's taxes, and then it becomes a foreclosure issue if it's not paid. We can also sue personally, but you're probably going to be suing the corporation to get for money from Mr. Andrew or from his father personally. You'd have to pierce the corporate veil, which is not a small task, but more than likely, I would say this probably rolls to the taxes and it goes unpaid, and then the county forecloses on it.
So unless
we do have an obligation though to sue and to make an attempt to get the money back. So that's a foregone conclusion.
Oh, okay, I get that. So what if he has other properties under this LLC around the city? Would they be able to
If
attach?
there are other properties of value that are held in the name of the same LLC, then potentially we could sue and ask for those buildings as compensation for what we spent here.
So you're looking into
As enforcement of a judgment lien, but first we have to obtain the judgment.
and you're looking to see if there's other properties under this LLC, correct?
Yes, we are aware. I almost guarantee you though that this is, I haven't looked up this particular property. Most of his, no, that's not true. Recently, most of his LLCs have been sole asset LLCs.
Okay. All right, thank you. Can you keep us apprised of that, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
And I am asking for this to be expedited since this work was done 6 weeks or 2 months ago and the vendor's looking for payment.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on 22-141? Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. This is similar to Tom Scanlon. I thought we had lien authority, that we can place liens on.
We can place liens if they're behind on taxes or behind on, but what we place liens against is we place liens against their insurance proceeds. And if they don't have insurance, we have on numerous occasions suggested to state officials that you require you to have insurance for a vehicle, but you can own a building free and clear and have no, I mean, even just a fire policy on the building would be appropriate, because if it was a requirement across all buildings, I don't believe the city itself can impose that. I believe it's something that the state would have to do. That to just the record keeping and the upkeep, but that's something that the state should look at mandating. A minimum fire insurance policy, just to remove. And not even so much fire policy as a replacement value, but for demo value.
So
We have a
let's
very low recovery rate. We try, but we have a very low recovery rate on those fire damage properties. Most times the LLC just walks away.
Chuck, so where's the money from the
If you want to add other reforms, have them re-register LLCs every 2 year, pay a fee, and disclose who their members are. There are other states that do that.
Chuck, so where's this 106,000 come from? We're paying to Gora Corporation for the demo.
I'm sorry, Tom, you broke up. I don't know if anybody heard your question.
The question was, Brian, that Councilman Scanlon had the 106,000 for the payment for the demolition. What line is it coming from?
It's going to come from a demolition line we're going to create in the insurance fund.
All right, thank you. I don't like it, but thank you.
None of us do.
Okay.
Is that all the questions on that one?
Go ahead, Chuck. RL 22-144.
22-144 is an RL to help me out in my finance department. Right now, I'm short a assistant comptroller that we finally been able to find that's going to start next Monday. I'm short a payroll person, payroll specialist who's going up into personnel. I have a AP person that is retiring and a purchasing person that's also leaving and taking another position at the sewage treatment plant. We've been able, between Sharon and I, we've been able to find the assistant comptroller, and we've been able to find a payroll person. In order to make all this happen, I'm asking you to reduce the assistant comptroller's position from 61,800 a year down to 59,000, and increase the payroll position from 42,745 to 44,750, and the remaining difference, put that into travel and training, since both of those people are going to need some travel and training.
Chuck meant staff, he meant staff accountant, not assistant comptroller, but it is cost neutral.
You're correct. I'm sorry about that, Sharon. Thanks. And I'm asking for this to be expedited since we've made offers to these people, and they're both are hopefully starting next Monday.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Chuck on RL 22-144? Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, Megan, RL 22-147.
Yes, thanks, Councilman. So this is authorized the sale of 5 vacant lots on Lyon and Munsell Street to Greater Opportunities of Broome and Shenango. This is supporting the affordable housing project currently under construction at 3949 Munsell Street. The Lyon Street lots will be used for parking and driveway access, and the Munsell Street lots will be kept green space for now and maintained by Greater Opportunities.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Megan on RL 22-147? Councilwoman Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you, President Strong. Hi, Megan, how are you?
Hi, Councilmember Freeman, I'm well.
So just to clarify, there's going to be no construction on these lots. They will stay either green space or vacant lots, essentially.
Well, right now the construction is happening at the 3949 is that lot on the corner of Liberty and Munsell Street as part of the Northside Rehabilitation Project. The lots on Lyon Street will be the parking lots to support that affordable housing project. And then the lots on Munsell Street are not exactly adjacent to that project, but there's one remaining residential house that I think the owner has passed away. So I think Greater Opportunities is hopeful that they'll acquire that one as well. For now, the way the legislation will be written, it's Greater Opportunities will be keeping those lots green space. And if they were to change that in the future, like to come back to us with another affordable housing project, that would just need planning commission approval in order to do that. But there's nothing currently planned yet for those lots.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments on RL 22-147? Okay, go ahead, Megan. 22-149.
Yes, so we are asking for this to be expedited. This is authorizing the sale of 20 to 22 Lyle Ave to the YWCA of Binghamton and Broome County. This is for the YWCA's $24 million affordable housing and childcare project downtown. Council voted unanimously to approve this back in January, if you recall. Why we're coming back to you now is the YWCA is asking to take title to these properties by the end of the month because that they feel it'll help them bolster a grant application. So the way that the current legislation that council has approved is written states that the YWCA needs planning commission approval of the project before the city can transfer title, which is our standard practice. The Y is not at the point yet where they're ready to go to the planning commission for approval. So in the absence of that, Corp Council is recommending the addition of a reverter clause that allows the city to transfer title to the property now, but protects us in the event that the project hits a road bump or doesn't happen for whatever reason going forward. So again, we're asking this to be expedited really at the Y's request so that we can transfer the properties, the title to the properties by the end of the month for them to meet their grant funding deadline.
Okay, any questions or comments for Megan on RL 22-149? Okay, thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Okay. Brian is going to lead us in discussion. Discussion in a second, but RL 22-140. He's going to talk to us about that, and then we're going to have a discussion about the future of our meetings and things like that. So, Brian, go ahead on 22-140.
Well, 22-140 is a proposal to amend the existing public nuisance abatement law that is of the city of Binghamton to remove. First of all, we're removing the administrative proceeding so that there's not ability to do it administratively. But we're also, the main focus is to remove any, there was a recent court case in which the court disagreed and found that it was improper, constitutionally improper, to count points for calls by domestic violence victims or tenants or owners who called for police assistance. Quite frankly, I have been the person that enforced our law for the last 20 years. We never did that. It's just always seemed like common sense. That would be stupid to do that. Other communities who use the law almost exactly like ours were not as prudent in doing that. And so there was a constitutional challenge and it was struck down because it was improper. Quite frankly, I think which is bad legal advice in those communities because no one should have ever done that in the first place. But what we're doing is amending the law, proposing to amend the law so that it removes that type of discretion so that it is explicitly spelled out in the law that you don't garner points if you call the police to report a crime, and you don't garner points if you're the victim of domestic violence. Is there any questions?
Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
This is just from my own personal understanding. Do you have a tracked change so that we can see the amended language and the original language?
I believe that what we provided to you is actually, we are going to take out what the old one said and supplant it completely with what we provided.
Oh, this is brand new.
This is the stuff that's going in to replace everything that's there.
Okay.
Well, not that it's all brand new.
Okay.
There are currently a definition of conviction, but we are completely gutting that old definition and replacing it with what's there, what's on this proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you like to see the legislation? I can give you the legislation in its entirety. It deals with preliminary injunctions. It deals with a lot of stuff that's kind of archaic. And if you're an attorney, I'm not speaking down, but if you're not an attorney, and actually as an attorney, it makes my head spin too. Like, it's very legalistic and very legalese. I can provide it to you and maybe highlight the portions where the changes are occurring so that you know exactly what's being changed. The other thing that we'll be doing is there's a list of points. Well, obviously, we're going to be removing marijuana and all mentions of marijuana out of that list because that's now been legalized since the law was last used. So it's not something that's a highlight of this, but it's just something that while we're doing it, you might as well update everything.
This is not language from a template. This is language.
I will not say
based
that it's not from a template. Methazine, who's here with us, she actually took, like, Town and Union did this very similar thing. Johnson City did a very similar thing. Besta did a very similar thing. She took those and sort of conformed it to be our statute and
Got it.
conform with what we have on the books.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So yes, if it's already drafted, then I would just like to see.
When it's finalized, when we put it all together, we'll send you a finalized copy of it if you'd like. Of the whole chapter. It's a substantial. It's substantial, but we'll send it to you. That's why I suggested that I will shade the areas that were. Here's the question. There's a whole section, an article of it that deals with the administrative procedure. That's just being stricken altogether. Do you want to see what's being removed totally? Because when it was adopted, my advice to the council that adopted was that you should not do this because this is bad. The administrative procedure is bad. So we never used it. Do you want to see that as well? Or would you just like to see what it's going to look like in its final?
Again, I didn't, usually when something so substantial changes, there's something that there's a reason.
Yep.
And so that's what I kind of, and usually it's some smaller changes, some structure, sentence structure. But where you would see the track changes.
I would say that if you were to take the document and I were to do the track changes in what we have on the books, what you would see is this would be addition. What you have on these 2 pages are the additions that are necessary. You would see some minor strike throughs in the list of points, things that earn points, and you would see a large number of pages with lines being drawn through it, removing the administrative procedure. And that's what you would see.
And this is because this recently changed in court.
Yes.
So we needed to make sure our policies are
Within the last several years, the whole COVID thing has sort of thrown off the definition of what recent is, but yes.
Okay. Okay. Because there may be other wholesale changes necessary based upon new legislation.
It is possible, but I will tell you that I believe that we have, when the decision came down, the research Bethazine did, I believe that if there was any more changes to be made to it, we would probably be proposing it to you.
That.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments for Brian on RL 22-140? Okay, now we'd like to have a quick discussion about our meetings. A memo late this afternoon, Brian sent Lee and I a memo and I forwarded it probably about 10 minutes later to all of you. I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at it. So before they start, the gist of it, at least on the starting point, is as of right now, remember Juneteenth is being commemorated on June 20th. So our meeting that week is June 21st and 22nd. So as of right now, the work session on June 21st will have to be in this room in person with the public allowed to be in this room on June 21st as of right now. And then moving forward, obviously, if the governor extends the state of emergency, then that could move back. But my understanding is that Lori and her team and corporate counsel are working to that end as far as security and things that need to be done in here to make sure that we're ready for that. So that being said, go ahead, corporate counsel team, on options at that point that we may or may not consider, and any other thoughts that you have on this.
Well, I think we actually had some discussions with the clerk. I think the best line that I've heard from him was that you have option A, which is do nothing, and you go back to having in-person meetings like we did pre-COVID. That is probably the simplest and most effective, and it avoids. Let me put it this way. There are some questions about this new law that even when we ask the Committee on Open Government and we ask some of the NICOM, the people who know, they're like, we're not exactly sure what they meant here or what they meant there. The other thing is that if you wanted to take advantage of the opportunity of the new law to adopt a local law that would allow for remote participation, it is something that has to be very specific, and it has to be something that's exceptional circumstances, which they define at one point as being unexpected, but you're also expected to give 7 days notice beforehand before you do it. So to me, something that's unexpected happens in the 7-day window. So not exact. That's why I'm saying that there's issues there with how that is interpreted. The safest bet, the safest way to proceed, I believe, is to return to in-person meetings. In terms of legal requirements and making sure that no one challenges your meetings as being a violation of the open meetings law.
So even with the confusion or the convoluted nature of what they're saying, we still would only have till, what are you saying here, June 9th?
Yes, we have until June 9th to adopt a local. No, I do not believe you only have until June 9th. You can continue to operate as we have been until June 9th. At any point, or actually June 8th, but at any point after that, you still have the right to adopt a local law to take advantage of this, of what they passed. Up until you adopt the local law, which means it takes effect 30 days after it's passed here and sent to the Secretary of State, that's when it become effective. Until it had become effective, you could not operate or appear remotely or take advantage of that law or the procedure that you enact. You would have to wait until the law took effect to take advantage of it. What they're saying is there's a period of time now where you continue to act the way you are and get something enacted so that as soon as that time period ends, you can go right into the next, into operating that way.
So
but nothing says that you must act by this date or you're cut off from going back.
So we would still have that option once the rules become more clear, or there's
Yes.
a little more
Yep.
clarity on what that would actually look like.
Yes, that's correct.
And one more thing for me, and then I'll open it up. So if you were to adopt a local law to allow that under extraordinary circumstances, regardless of the time frame, does that mean that every single meeting you would have to be prepared for that, regardless of whether anybody took advantage of that or not, including the public? Would you have to, in other words, would you have to prepare basically for in here and there, even if nobody used that? Or would you have to have notice that somebody was going to use it to set all that up?
My read of the statute was that you would have to have the technology or the technical capabilities to pull that off, but that you, unless someone was taking advantage of it, you wouldn't have to have it online, which creates a real problem for me, because then how do people know whether they can participate remotely, where they're going to, it seems like it creates a notice issue, a fairness issue, because it's going to be on again, off again. Now, if you have, where it makes sense is if you have a member who has an illness, and that's one of the things that's sort of defined as unexpected, like they have a health issue, they can't be here, and it's going to go on for a protracted period of time, it may make sense then to adopt a local law to allow that person to appear remotely. And then you would have that technology in place on a routine basis until during that duration. And there's some other family, they could have a family member that they're primary caregiver for, and it would allow them to attend remotely. But those are kind of some limited circumstances. And you always have that option if that were to present itself of doing it at that time.
One last thing real quick. Who's the purveyor of that? Would we have to vote quickly like we used to when somebody was outside the city, where we have to say, are we going to allow council member, whoever, to do this, or do you take them at their word?
It seems to be that you would.
What's that?
There seems to be an implication that you make application to apply for it, but it also seems like it's the type of thing that you could spell out in the policy that you adopt. You could spell out what the steps are that someone gets to take advantage of it.
Okay. Councilwoman Freeman, go ahead.
So I think one of my questions you answered in that for a city council member to participate remotely, it would either have to be an unexpected circumstance,
Exceptional circumstance,
exceptional,
which and
okay.
unexpected is part of that.
okay, or something that is deemed appropriate beforehand and then voted on, such as an
I'm not certain if it has to be voted on. It could be something
Okay.
that where you could adopt a policy saying that you have to make application to the chair. The chair could say yay or nay. It doesn't have to be like
Okay.
the whole body has to accept it, but it has to be. Obviously, you can't just make up a reason and say, I meet that standard. It has to be something that's like you're a caregiver, you're have a personal illness, you have a disability. There's a list of things the state suggests. We have racked our brain attending a funeral. Some of those things might qualify. I don't mean to be callous, but we've dealt with those issues for the last 100 years. And the way that happened is you missed a meeting for most of those things.
Mhm.
It's not the end of the world. Now, listen, if it's going to be an ongoing situation, that's going to be 6-8 months, where that's something that we haven't crossed. That's not a bridge we've crossed. In those cases, people have resigned, and I don't know if that's required now. There may be technology that allows us to get around that.
Okay, that's interesting. So my other question then is, and I don't know if we've addressed this yet, but then how would this policy affect the public's about ability to participate remotely? I know that we said, or I think anecdotally, we've said that we do want to keep the meeting streaming to YouTube because I think that's a great benefit.
I don't think it has any effect on the streaming of the meetings.
Okay, what about participation? Like if someone wanted to call in and make a public comment or something rather than attending in person?
The thing that would most be affected by this law is that if you're allowing somebody to do that, you would have to have the technology in place so that people in the audience know exactly what is being said or what you're seeing that person say through the screen. So like
Okay,
the TV's here being focused towards you,
Uh-huh.
that could create an issue. Because if those people out there need to be able to see it as well.
I see.
big screen up here. A big screen's up here, something along those lines, yes.
Okay. And
But I think that quite frankly, I'm not certain that that is the situation that this law is geared to go towards at all.
okay.
This law is more based about how you participate. in the
Right,
meetings
right.
And how members participate.
Yeah, I
How the
figured-
public, it's actually the term they use over and over again, it's the public body. So yourself, the CDAC,
Right.
the zoning board, the planning commission, members of the public body.
Okay, yeah, I know that definitely makes sense. I know that we're gonna receive a lot of pushback or, opinions about how this applies to the general public. I know people have been antsy to get back here in person, but also I think the ability to participate virtually has opened up access to the meetings to members of the public in a way that we haven't seen before. And I understand the logistical, like the legal challenges and just saying like, okay, anyone can participate from anywhere. Like you can't do that. But, it does seem like I wonder.
I'm not good at all. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say like, I'm not a legal expert, but, I wonder if we couldn't kind of use this as like a jumping off point at like an easy segue into continuing public participation, and I don't know, what I'm hearing is that that's a complicated question, but, it may be worth exploring.
Yep. I haven't been to all your meetings, but how often recently has the public taken advantage of their ability to participate remotely?
What's every meeting?
A couple. It's been pretty small. Last
two or
meeting there
three
were, last meeting there wasn't anybody.
I just remember public comment when like 30 people would line up to speak.
No, we haven't had that for a while.
Okay.
What's that?
We've been averaging one participant a week for about 3 months now. So,
we'll continue to look into that. I mean,
Yeah.
and see if other places. I don't think that we are going to be recreating the wheel. Other people have dealt with this, and we'll see what.
Yeah, I that's why I asked about the date. If the date's not there, then we're going to have options available to us ongoing. I think coming out of the gate, we don't have the resources or the logistics to pull off both things at the same time. But if it remains an option to us, then I think we keep that in front of us. Who else? What's that? Councilman Scringy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I don't know how the majority or all of my colleagues feel, but so here's a hypothetical that, to be perfectly honest, I don't think is much of a hypothetical. So if we only go to 100% back to pre-COVID, we have work session A that is on a Monday. And then Tuesday afternoon at 2:30 in the afternoon, we receive an email that somebody that was in that room tested positive for COVID-19. And now, because we did not recognize two things: number one, the concept of flexibility, and number two, that it's the year 2022, and the role that technology plays in all of this, that we are now in a position that if the municipal guidelines change with respect to you test positive and you now have to quarantine for 5 to 10 days, regardless of your vaccination status, we are now literally in a position that the business meeting the very next day cannot be held because everybody in that room has been exposed, needs to quarantine, and there isn't even one person to gain a quorum. And
I believe there's a way around that, Councilman.
There may be. I just the reality of it is it would seem to me that I mean, for what it's worth, right? I mean, look at what we're doing right now. We're both in person and using Zoom. So I definitely understand that there's some interim period with respect to June 8th and then moving forward. I look forward to getting back into person, but I would very much caution us that there's an opportunity here to strike a balance with both, which allows both for flexibility as well to make sure that we're following everything. And I just think that that's something we should consider.
Councilman Scringy, I don't disagree with you, but as of right now, that's up to the governor. We won't have a choice after June 8th. And we redid this whole room so there could be social distancing and spacing. So, and even if we did have a choice, that wouldn't be the prerogative to be able to use it for that reason. So I don't know.
Yeah, the way the law is set up now, you could only utilize a remote meeting like we're having now if there were exceptional circumstances. I will also go back. I interrupted you and I apologize for that. There is
no, you're okay, Frank.
At the end of this law that says that if there is a local state of emergency declared, which if every single council person had to be quarantined, I believe a mayor would be justified in declaring a state of emergency simply so that you could use this type of procedure to conduct business. Now, it may have to wait for 7 days, but he could declare it and it could go forward on a remote basis under that circumstance.
That's good. That's good to hear. And I appreciate the feedback, and I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. I am in no way, shape, or form attempting to use what honestly is a rarity and a low possibility to explain all other outcomes. But I just think, and as I mentioned earlier, I understand that there's an interim period post the June 8th, but I think this warrants a discussion into what potentially can be done. And I think we should probably have that discussion maybe at the next work session.
Listen, aside from what I sent you in the memo, I think it'd be wise, given the fact that we do have this technology, to come up with a protocol so that when you need to use it in an emergency, you know you have it in place so that it can be implemented quickly, rather than trying to do it on the fly. So I think there's some wisdom in what you're saying. I don't think you're going to get back to council members or any public official can participate in their meetings regularly from a remote capacity. But you could have a plan in place. You definitely want to talk with IT and have a plan in place about if you have to go remote, how it's going to be done. Does everybody have the capability? Does everybody have the equipment necessary in place? The cameras, the computers? How do we make sure it's feasible when we need it?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't want when a situation like that arises, I don't want us to be in the situation where because we didn't plan, now we're planning to fail. Whatever it is that we need to address those specific situations, I'm saying let's have those conversations now so that way we can get a plan in place. So if something ever does happen, we have that flexibility. That's all I'm saying.
That's wise.
Okay, any other questions or comments for now? Like I said, I think that's why we don't have a deadline per se. So my guess is that these rules will hopefully become a little more clear as to what's possible. But if we can do something simple that allows for something, we just have to make sure that we have, we can be consistent and be fair about it when how we apply it.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. But I just want to confirm, so Lori and whoever else is working out with the security, and so we're on a path to
we had a discussion with them and she met with us because it was an issue for her. She's been very good about watching the governors when they declare states of emergency, and she's monitoring that situation.
Right.
In the way it's been going, I would not be surprised if in the first week of June, we got another extension for another 30 days.
The question is if we're prepared and she has an extent, but we still have the choice. We could have people in here right now if we want.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
You could.
So if she extends it, then we'll have to make another decision, but I guess we'll wait until that happens. I'd hate to waste the resources. I kind of want people to come back in here, but I guess we'll wait and see what she does. Once they're set up, I mean, you're on the right. They're going to be here one way or the other, right? You can't. That's the whole point.
There will
of the
be a
30 days, right?
cancellation time. We can cancel it, but yeah, once you make that decision, it's good to go with it.
Right.
Have to go back.
Okay. Right. Would we be able to set up protocols in here as far as just spacing and
because she deals with personnel issues, I would defer to Sharon Sorkin on that question.
The court system is masks required. That's because the Office of Court Administration still has not changed their rules. With that said, outside the courts, we abide by New York state law, which if you are vaccinated, no mask is required. This council can adopt its own rules for the chamber and as well as its method of proceeding, as we've discussed about previously. So if you'd like to meet either, I know you have a safety committee. I don't know exactly what it's called, but I know there's one that covers it. It's within the jurisdiction of the MPA committee, certainly. You can meet and discuss the rules of this body and the members of public participating. Just remember that enforcement of that can be tricky and deemed a restriction on speech and disability, and doing individualized review for members of the public can be difficult. And so who would be enforcing mask restrictions in the event somebody alleges a disability, for example, would also have to be considered.
Yeah, Mr. President, I just want to add, I agree with Sharon on that. That's dicey. That is very dicey.
Right. It seems like it'd be simpler. I mean, don't want to go back to our to a discussion we had last summer, but one of the reasons this room was redone was because of, distancing. Seems like just asking people to space it when appropriate would be a simpler way.
Yeah.
But
And
just
there-
ask them, but ask them more out of just respect or whatever, but not,
Yeah.
two people are related to each other, partners or spouse, whatever, they can sit next to each other, but
Yeah.
we could
And
just
there's-
ask people to do certain things out of, but not
And there's no-
necessarily enforce it.
And there's no knock the other way. If someone wants to wear a mask, they obviously have the right to wear a mask if they so choose. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right. Okay, thank you, everyone. Hopefully these rules or the guidance on that will come out and make it a little bit clearer over the next period of time. Mr. Clerk, anything short pending legislation? Nothing crazy?
We have 3 items from our previous work session, along with the 4 that were expedited tonight.
Okay. Anything else? Long work session. Thanks for everybody for being patient. Anything else for tonight?
Motion
Okay.
to adjourn.
All right, we are adjourned. Good night, everyone. What's that? Do I need to say it? Can I just adjourn the work session? I thought the work session was not like a business meeting.
Not get in a second, but you probably should get it.